Hi, thanks for joining me in this discussion of visibility. We're going to be talking a little bit about how visibility is reported in surface weather observations, in other words, in the METARs. So first, we're going to go through the definition of prevailing visibility. Believe it or not, there are two definitions. The first definition is it's the visibility that is considered representative of visibility conditions at the station. That seems pretty redundant, but what they mean by that, it's basically what the weather machine is reporting at the airport. Believe it or not, weather machines haven't been around for but maybe only about 20 years. So before that, they had another definition that we're going to look at now. That definition is the greatest distance objects can be seen and identified through at least half of the horizon circle, and that need not necessarily be continuous or contiguous. And that's the definition that we use when humans make weather observations. And believe it or not, there are still humans that make weather observations at airports today. So when a weather observer at the airport is trying to determine the visibility around the airport, they need to have some sort of references, some posts that they can identify or things they can identify around the airport and know the distance out to those objects. Here's a picture of a lovely international airport at Grand Forks. You can see the lagoon to the northeast, also Kelly Farm and Kelly Tower. I'm not sure if Billboard is on this. It's kind of hard to see. It's a little bit farther to the south. But looking at this, these black rings around the airport are actually mile distances. They're range rings. And they're measured, I think, every mile to a half a mile away from the airport. You see the first range ring is 1 mile, and that would be the closest corner of the lagoon to the airport is about, well, a little bit less than a mile. The farthest corner is about approximately 2.5 miles away from the airport. Other things such as Clifford Hall or the University of North Dakota is approximately about 4 miles to the southeast of the Grand Forks International Airport. So if we can see things that are 4 miles away, we know the distance and we can estimate the visibility. If the visibility gets really bad, then they use another chart at the airport. And this one is a little bit more detailed. It shows objects around the airport such as the VOR or the ILS localizer antennas or things like that. Things around the airport that you can identify, hangars and things like that. So I know that when the visibility drops to the south to approximately 5/8 of a mile, I should probably be able to just eke out the FedEx hangar to the south. Or to the northwest, if the visibility drops to half a mile, I should be able to see the VOR. And all of these observations are made from the normal observing weather site. And in this case, it was very close to the center of the airport back in 2005. So the idea here is, according to the definition of prevailing visibility, it's the greatest distance that you can see through half of the horizon circle, and that need not be contiguous. So here we have an example. I tried to use a little bit of gray to indicate fog and reducing visibility. But you can see that the visibility has dropped. Estimating it to the north, you can see the range ring is 3 miles, and that's about half of the horizon. To the south, it looks like it's about maybe 2 miles, and that's also half of the horizon. So going through our definition of prevailing visibility, it's the greatest distance that you can see through half of the horizon. Well, the greatest visibility, the greatest distance that we can see is 3 miles, and that's half of the circle or half of the horizon. So your prevailing visibility would be 3 miles. It's lower to the south, but you can see greater to the north. This is important when you're flying. If you are shooting an ILS to runway 35 left at Grand Forks, in this case, the prevailing visibility is reported 3 miles. You break out at 2 miles and you start to complain to the control tower, I only had 2 miles visibility. Well, that's right. You had 2 miles visibility, but still the prevailing visibility is 3 miles. This is why it's important for pilots to understand the concept of prevailing visibility. Here's another example, and these figures are not necessarily the best figures, but we're going to work our way through these. This one, the yellow indicates the distances that you can see, and the gray indicates where there's fog. So looking at this, you can see to the south that the visibility is basically unlimited. There's no real obstruction to vision looking to the south. And you always start with the greatest visibility. So the greatest visibility is to the south. It's unlimited, but that's only about maybe 90 degrees of the horizon circle. And our definition of prevailing visibility said that it has to be through 180 degrees, or half of the horizon circle. So we don't have unlimited visibility. We go to the next greatest visibility. The next greatest visibility is the 2-mile ring. You can see 2 miles to the west. You can see 2 miles to the east. Actually, you can also see 2 miles to the south. You can see a lot more than 2 miles, but you can definitely see 2 miles to the south. So we have 2 miles of visibility through 3/4 of the horizon circle, and that's more than 1/2. Prevailing visibility is 2 miles. You see, once again, it's lower visibility to the north. If you're coming in from the north trying to land on the back course to runway 17 right approach, you'd have 1 mile visibility, but it's being reported as 2. So you need to understand the concept of prevailing visibility. Here's another example, and in this case, the greatest, or the outer ring, is 3 miles. To the west, you can see 3 miles, but to the south, you can see 2 miles. And then to the northwest, north, northeast, and southeast, you can see 1 mile reduced visibility. So based on that, you always start with the greatest visibility, 3 miles. You can see through 90 degrees of the horizon circle. That's less than half, so we'll go to our next greatest visibility. Our next greatest visibility is 2 miles, and you can see 2 miles to the south, and you can also, in fact, see 2 miles to the west. You can see a lot more than 2 miles, but you definitely got 2 miles to the west. So that is your prevailing visibility. 2 miles, because you can see 2 miles through half of the horizon circle. Here's another example. This one's actually pretty easy. The outer ring represents 3 miles. That's the distance that weather observers can see, and the inner ring with the gray indicates 2 miles. So in this case, you can see 3 miles through half of the horizon circle. That's the greatest distance that you can see. Your prevailing visibility is 3 miles. This is what it looks like in the weather observers test. When weather observers take a test to be certified, they have to pass prevailing visibility. In this case, you always start out with the greatest visibility. Sometimes people get hung up on fractions. They say about maybe 8/5 of the population don't understand fractions. So in this case, the greatest visibility that we can see is actually 1/2 of a mile, and that's to the southwest. That is not the prevailing visibility, because you can only see through 90 degrees of the horizon. So you go to the next greatest, and the next greatest is 1/4 of a mile. You can see 1/4 of a mile to the northwest, and that's through 90 degrees of the horizon. But you definitely can see to the southwest 1/4 of a mile. You can see a 1/2 mile, but if you got a 1/2 mile, you got a 1/4 of a mile. So your prevailing visibility, 1/4 of a mile, because that's the greatest distance that you can see through the horizon circle. Here's another example where the visibility is very low in all 4 quadrants. And you can see that the values are the same as in the previous example, except they're just kind of scrambled up a little bit. You've got a 1/4 of a mile to the northwest, an 1/8 of a mile to the northeast, a 1/2 mile to the southeast, and an 1/8 of a mile to the southwest. So you always start out with the greatest visibility. In this case, the greatest visibility would be 1/2 of a mile. You can see that to the southeast, but that's only 90 degrees of the horizon. So you have to go to the next greatest, which would be 1/4. Now 1/4 is to the northwest. It's not right next to 1/2, but according to the definition of prevailing visibility, it's the greatest visibility that can be seen through half of the horizon circle, and that need not be continuous or contiguous. In other words, next to each other. So in this case, the prevailing visibility would be 1/4 of a statute mile. So that's a little bit about how humans make weather observations and how we determine the prevailing visibility using the definition of prevailing visibility. When you look at METARs, prevailing visibility is always in the main body of the report. It's what you see there reported as visibility. And depending upon where you live, it may be reported differently. Here in the United States, we use statute miles. You'll never see more than 10 statute miles reported because that's the maximum resolution of the ASOS. I know humans are making the observation at certain airports. They do at Grand Forks and Minneapolis and other large airports. But we're limited by the machine. We don't report anything more than 10 miles. Back when I flew in the 1980s, Part 135 used to fly freight, and I would see in the observations reports in Wyoming of 100 miles because I knew weather observers out there could see the mountains and they were 100 miles away. You don't see that anymore. 10 is the most you can see. Other reports of visibility, if you see an M in front of a visibility, prevailing visibility, that means that it is measured by a weather machine, an ASOS or AWOS, and M means minimum or smallest or lowest. So that's the lowest visibility is 1/4 that the machine can measure. And believe it or not, the visibility might be less than that, but the machine can't measure anything less than 1/4 of a mile. In Europe and every other country besides the United States almost, they use meters. So in this case, you can see 10 or 7,000 meters being reported. If you see 10 kilometers, that's equivalent to 6 miles. Sometimes they'll report in kilometers also. That's a little bit how visibility measurements are made. And we'll be talking about other types of measurements that humans make in other videos. Thanks for joining me.